This is Starships and Steel, and today, Sorcery. Stay tuned. Today on Starships and Steel, this is my part 4 of Conan 2D20 by Modiphius. Today we're going to talk about sorcery, magic. In Dungeons and Dragons, magic works a certain way. You're wizards, you get spells, you get a lot of spells, cast magic missile, fireball, whatever. They learn a lot of stuff, and as they get more and more powerful, they become super powerful. The magic in Conan works a little bit differently. So today we're going to talk about that and how it works and see if it's as complicated as some people seem to think that it is, and we're going to go forward from there. Before we do that, I'm going to pour myself a beverage because I got a lot of things to say. I got an outline so we don't lose anything. And today we're drinking from Alley Cat, Copper Dragon Series Double IPA. So I'm not a big IPA fan, so I'm not really sure why I decided to pick this one, apart from the fact that it's got a dragon on it. This beer is intended for hopheads, so I probably know people that would like this. It might not be me. We're going to drink it while we talk anyways. 7.5% alcohol, brewed in Edmonton, Alberta. Let's give her a shot. Pour this bad boy in the cup. It's got a nice color. Okay. So, Copper Dragon, Alley Cat, Double IPA. It's definitely pretty hoppy. I'm not going to rate this one because it's not really my thing. So, sorcery in Conan is not like I was saying, not like D&D. The first thing your sorcerer needs is someone to teach them. So this is going to come in the form of a talent. As you roll up your character, you want to build a sorcerer, you're going to pick things and direct him towards sorcery. You're going to give him some sorcery expertise. When you have one sorcery expertise, you can take the Patron Talent. The Patron Talent is a representation of your character being in service or learning from someone that can teach them. They will have demands of you. So what does all that mean? So in terms of game mechanics, it's pretty simple. There's a dude or a girl that teaches you, and it's a demand. Demand is dealt with during upkeep, which is 5 combat dice rolled and paid in either gold, vigor, or resolve. So this is going to give you ways to pay them depending on what they are, and you and your GM should come up with what your patron is and the things you're doing to make their demands met. Perhaps a old wizard from some lost civilization, or I don't know, has need of life force, and so he teaches you, and as you learn, your upkeep is to pay him in blood. So perhaps the start of your sessions, your upkeep is to pay vigor, so you start all of your sessions with less vigor than you would normally start with, because you've paid it in blood. Or however you want to do it. Like, could be strictly between you and your GM, and I'll say that about this entire chapter, this entire concept. A lot of sorcery is you and your GM being creative. And that goes with alchemy as well. So when you get a patron, what do you get? Do you get magic? No. When you get a patron, you get 1 petty enchantment. So this is alchemy. Exploding liquors, burning, fire, that kind of stuff. You don't have to take the patron talent. You don't have to go down this path to get those. If you take the alchemist path, you can get the petty enchantments that way without having to deal with. Once you have the patron talent, you can take the sorcery talent. When you take the sorcery talent, you lose permanently 2 combat dice worth of your resolve. permanently. As you learn magic, your grip on the world, your grip on sanity slowly begins to slide away. You're less resilient to things, and you can start to go a little bit crazy. Sorcery in Conan is dark and dangerous. Never forget that. You get to take a spell. You get your first spell. Conan has 13 spells. 13 spells. That's nothing. It's not a huge number of spells, no. There's not spells like Magic Missile and Fireball. But there's spells like Astral Wanderings, Atavistic Voyage, Commune with the Wild, Dismember, Enslave, Favor of the Gods, Form of Beast, Fury of the Elements, Haunt the Mind, Placate the Dead, Raise up the Dead, Summon a Horror, and Venom on the Wind. So each of these spells can be learned by a patron, or after you have a patron, you can make pacts with other patrons and get up to 2 spells per. Each one of these packs have their own demands and their own upkeep involved with them. So it can get expensive. Learning a spell, each spell has a cost. As for example, we're going to look at Raise Up the Dead. Raise Up the Dead is difficulty 1 to cast. It costs 1 resolve to cast and 1 resolve to learn. So to learn it, your resolve again goes down by 1 permanently. When you're casting, it goes down and it'll come back up, but when you learn it, down by 1. So Raise Up the Dead. Difficulty 1, you can be like, I'm going to roll Raise Up the Dead. I'm going to try and raise some skeletons. You roll your sorcery dice, and if you succeed, you're going to get momentum probably. If you don't get any momentum, it's probably not going to do very much. If you get momentum, say we get 2 points momentum, with Raise Up the Dead, you can raise 4 skeleton minions for 2 momentum. And all of the spells have multiple effects. And the game wants you, as the player and the GM, to come up with more ways to spend momentum for these spells. Work together with your GM, be creative. Come up with cool ideas. There's a lot in here. Most of the spells have 4 or 5 different effects. So when you get a spell, you get 4 or 5 different effects. Let's look at Raise Up the Dead again. So Raise Up the Dead has 3 basic effects. One is calling forth minions, one is calling forth toughened undead, and one is Death Watch, which lets them stay longer and under your control longer. There's also alternative effects, such as Suborn the Unliving. Influence a skeleton warrior under another sorcerer's control with a sorcery versus sorcery struggle. If successful, the skeleton warrior will obey commands for you, so your magic can take over other necromancers' magic as well. Tie the silver cord. Force a newly dead character to temporarily re-inhabit their body. The revivified character must have at least 1 wound successfully restored within the next round, or will be undead forever. So, if your guy dies, your necromancer sorcerer type guy who has Raised Up the Dead could cast this. It's an epic D5 roll. If he's successful, the character will be forced back into his body alive, and a healer can give him back a wound, and he's essentially raised from the dead. A little bit more complicated than it might be in Conan, or rather in D&D, but it's possible. So all the spells have these alternative effects, different momentum spends that you can do to get different effects. And they have a bunch of different stuff in here. So as an example, quite often they'll have spells merged together to get different effects. So under Raise Up the Dead, they have one called Necromantic Servant. So they've used the concepts of Raise Up the Dead, and they've said it's daunting difficulty 3. It includes the 2 effects Unhallowed Minions and Death Watch. And it basically lets you summon a skeleton warrior minion as a more or less constant servant, doing your bidding until it is destroyed or banished. So look through the spells and see what they can do, and think of ways you could use those effects together to make more spells. Talk to your GM and say, hey, is this cool? Can we do this with this cost? The GM might say yes, might say no, might say yes but, no and. I don't know. But use your imagination for this chapter. Sorcery is this big, large thing. And they're going to come out with the Book of Skelos, which will have more sorcery in it. But for right now, this is what we have. There's a lot of devastating things in here. There's earthquakes, there's storms, there's rip your guys apart, there's one that pulls the heart out of the guy's body. There's all kinds of evil things in there. So I'll make another comment about patrons. If your patron dies, it's very hard to cast spells that they taught you. And there's a rule in here about how it works. I'm not going to go over it, but just know it gets difficult. And it's less difficult if you kill them or you plan for their death, but it's still difficult. So now we've got, so as we go forward through this, now we have like I printed off a sorcerer that I built. It's right here. So these sorcerers are from the Black Tower of Argos in the game I'm currently playing, that I'm DMing. The concept is there's a priesthood. They worship an ancient water god, Nethans. I hope my players don't watch this. So they worship an ancient water god, Nethans. As these priests go through, they're trained, and the best and the brightest are taken and taught sorcery. And they're the black sorcerers of Argos. So this guy, as I rolled him up, came up with willpower of 14, a sorcery of 4. So he's going to be rolling against 18. It's pretty epic, which is good, because we'll talk about one thing about sorcery in a second here. So I've got this guy as our example. He wants to cast a spell. He's taken Raise Up the Dead. He wants to raise up, I don't know, 2 skeletons. So it's difficulty 1. We get on our dice. Grab our d20s. And no d20s in here, they're all over here. He gets 2d20 normally. Difficulty 1, he needs 18s. So he decides that he wants to make sure that he gets what he wants. He's going to spend another point of momentum to get 3 dice. Rolls his dice. He gets a 5, a 1, and a 19. So, what does this mean? 5 is a success, obviously. 1 is 2 successes, which is 3 successes. Needs 1, 2 points of momentum. He can raise up 4 skeletons. It's pretty cool. To cast spells, sorcerers use a special minor action called focus. If they do not use this focus, then instead of 20s being complications, kind of, 19s and 20s are complications. But sorcery and complications work a little differently. If you fail to make your number, it's a complication. So, I rolled a 19. Didn't roll a 20, I rolled a 19. So we'll say that our sorcerer used his minor action to focus and his standard action to cast. So 20s are complications. I rolled a 19. Higher than my roll under, my target number, lower than a complication. Normally, in most tests, this wouldn't be a complication. In this case, it is. So what this complication might mean, I don't know. Maybe I raised up 4 skeletons, maybe 3 of them under my command, maybe 1 attacks me. Maybe the power of the sorcery is more horrible than I thought, and when I raise up those skeletons, I see how they died, and I take 2 CD mental damage. Whatever the GM decides to make it happen, it could happen. Complications are a lot. They're all over the place in sorcery. So having a target number of 18, that's a good thing. Our dude casts and takes, we'll say, that his resolve is, where'd the guy go? So his resolve was 15 when I started. He learned sorcery. He lost 1 point of resolve, and that takes him down to 14. When he learned Raise Up the Dead, that subtracted another 1, gives him 12 points of resolve. Cast the spell, his 12 goes to 11. So he has 11 points of resolve left. When he casts Raise Up the Dead, his complication allows him to see how these skeletons died, how horribly these people died. And it's so mind-numbing that he takes 4 points of resolve. That's a lot. So he goes from 11 to 7. So he's got 7 resolve left. Not enough to give him a wound or like a mental wound. But it definitely hurts him. But he's raised his skeletons. Good to go. Awesome. That's pretty much as simple as it is to cast the spell. It's not overly complicated. There's other things involved. There's counter sorcery. If a wizard watches another wizard cast the spell, so if this guy was in the room and he rolls in to cast his spell and he's like, I'm going to raise up the skeletons, join me. And there's another wizard watching who also knows Raise Up the Dead. The other wizard can be like, no, stop, and use his magic to try and prevent the wizard or the sorcerer from raising up those skeletons. In which case it turns into a sorcery test, and the momentum probably going to be reduced. The spell's probably going to be less effective. There's one other thing in the game called Cast for Consequence. If you cast for consequence, and whether you do or not is 100% up to the GM, and there's a time when the GM maybe just tell you you're casting for consequence for whatever reason. If you do, spell automatically successful. Awesome. However, it's probably going to generate complications. So, roll per normal. For every success or momentum that the sorcerer fails to achieve, counts as another complication. So if you need a difficulty 4, and let's say difficulty 3 needed 2 points of momentum. Difficulty 3, 2 points of momentum, so you decide to roll 5 dice. Pretty big spell. GM says you're casting for consequence. The dark ones want you to succeed, but they're bringing a price on your head when you do it. So difficulty 3, problem in this case, because my dude's really good, it's going to make it no problem. Let's change some numbers. Let's go 19, 19, 20. So I get 2 successes, 3 fails. I focused, so that's good. A 20 is still going to be 2 complications. 19 and 19 are going to be 2 more complications, so we're going to be at 4 complications. If I needed difficulty 3, I missed by 1, another complication. If I needed 2 points of momentum, I missed those 2 as well. 7 points. 7 complications. The spell is successful, but 7 complications. So whatever the GM wants to do with that, if you take 7 points of doom, takes 5 points of doom, makes you take some mental damage, whatever. It's bad. The number of complications you're going to get from casting for consequence, which probably isn't going to happen that often, but it depends on the sorcerer, which we'll talk about momentarily as an aside. The other thing I want to talk about quickly is tools. The general tool for the sorcerer is sorcerer's garbs, talismans, that kind of thing. That's going to again be pretty much up to you and the GM. You're going to have some kind of sorcerer's garb tool, whether it be robes or a talisman or tattoos on your body, whatever. If you don't have these things when you cast your spell, like a lot of tools, your difficulty goes up by 1. So if you're wearing your sorcerer's garbs and you're all cool with all that stuff and you make your difficulty rolls, like Raise Up the Dead, is going to be difficulty 1. It'll be difficulty 1. If for whatever reason, as an example, you're taken prisoner and they take off your sorcerer's garbs and give you like a burlap sack as a quick tunic for you, casting your spells is going to be more difficult. So when you try and raise up the dead, maybe you're in the hold of the ship as a slave and there's a bunch of guys that are dead because it's horrible conditions, and you want to use their dead bodies for your advantage to get out. You want to use their skeletal remains to attack the guards. When you cast that spell, it's going to go from difficulty 1 to difficulty 2, which means your momentum is going to be cut down. It's going to be harder to get a lot of skeletons out of it. So when you look at sorcery under the talents chapter, you're going to find 2 trees. You're going to find a basic tree, which gives you talents that deal with sorcery but don't give you spells. Things like Ritualist, where if you're helping, you get 2d20 instead of 1d20. And you're going to have a really small little short tree, which has Sorcerer and Patron. When you go forward to the Sorcery chapter, Sorcery and Patron will be expanded upon. We may see that expanded upon more in Skelos. Don't know yet. So it's going to go Patron, Sorcerer, Pact, barter your soul. So you can barter your soul to unholy things from the great void, from beyond, demons, devils, and they'll teach you for a cost, which might be your soul is burned in hell forever or whatever. And that might seem like, I don't care, that has a less effect on me in the game than having a patron. I'd rather just sell my imaginary soul to the imaginary devil. But a creative DM is probably not going to let it go that easy. Just remember that. So, recap. Rolling up sorcerers, put some stuff into willpower, expertise of sorcery. Take the Patron Talent, Petty Enchantment. You get a demand and upkeep. Take the Sorcery Talent, get a spell, lose resolve. Pick your spell. There's 13 spells. Each spell is going to have different effects that you can get from casting them based on how much momentum you get, whether you're successful or not. Any missed roll, any roll above your target number is a complication. Any roll of 20 is 2 complications. If a sorcerer fails to use his minor action to focus, 19s and 20s are 2 complications. So you roll 19, 2 complications. If you roll a 20, 2 complications. If you roll a 19 and 20, 4 complications. If a sorcerer who knows the same spell witnesses you casting and chooses to, they can enter into a sorcery struggle with you and reduce the amount of momentum you generate. Probably. When you cast spells, when you learn spells, the resolve is lowered. When you cast them, it's lowered for the scene, or however long the GM says. If it's learning them, it's removed permanently. So if you've learned 4 or 5 spells, and your resolve has gone down by 7 or 8, and you started with 15, and you lost 4 when you started, it's gone down by another 7 or 8, you've got 2 or 3, 4 left, it's going to be pretty easy for your sorcerer to be susceptible to mental attacks, like more than regular players. So remember that. They'll be on, powerful wizards and sorcerers will be on the edge of going crazy. So if you're building a character like that, you might want to also look into talents that protect you, give you courage and courage soak from mental attacks. Always wear your robes. If you don't, difficulty goes up by 1. If your patron dies, you're probably going to lose the ability to use the spells that he taught you. And that is sorcery in a nutshell. It's not complicated. It's not complicated at all. It does, however, have issues when it comes to imagination and using you and your GM to come up with stuff. If your player wants to, if you as a player or your player wants to have a spell that does something that's not described in the books, maybe they want to use a lightning bolt. We don't have lightning bolt in the game. What do we have? Let's pull this up. Venom on the wind, using intense forces of weather to harm or hinder a foe. Let's take a look at that. So Venom on the wind has the following effects: call clouds, call rain, call the storm, call the tempest, continue the call, lash of the heavens, pelting hail, draw a cover of darkness, shelter from the storm. So, you're probably, in order to cast lightning, you're probably going to need call clouds, which is momentum 1, difficulty 1, momentum 1, so that's pretty simple. Maybe call a storm, momentum 3. Not really, probably more accurate. So your wizard's going to have to call the storm, which is 3 momentum points. So we look down, there's stuff like a pelting hail, which all characters outside of shelter take X CD damage. So you could be like, call the storm is momentum 3, and lightning bolt is an X CD. So maybe you make a difficulty 2 or 3 to cast the spell. You're going to give them, make a difficulty 3 to cast them, call the storm. So you get that done. Awesome. And then every momentum above that causes 1 CD of lightning damage on a single foe. So now your wizards, instead of casting lightning bolt like out of their hands, they raise up their hands and they call forth a giant storm. And the storm swirls above, and a lightning bolt slashes down from the sky and electrifies their opponent and does X damage. So you can still do stuff like that. It's going to be different, and you want to do it within the context of the game and the feeling of the game. Sorcery in this game is not high magic, it's dark magic. It's learning and selling your soul and going a little bit crazy every time you learn a little bit more of the arcane arts. So, if this helped you understand sorcery, or if you have more questions, please leave a comment below. If you are liking the Conan 2D20 Modiphius system, give me a like. If you are wanting to subscribe to my channel because you want more of this content, please subscribe. I'm putting content out typically weekly, sometimes a little bit bigger space than that depending on what's going on in my life. Give me a subscribe, give me a like, give me a comment below. That's all I got today. Sorcery is bad.